We hope you all had a wonderful July 4th. Here on Horse Center, we're talking 3-year-old fillies and a huge Stars and Stripes card from Belmont Park.
It sure is, Brian. Great stakes racing headed by the Belmont Derby and the Belmont Oaks. Brian and I will take you through the entire card.
Big day of racing at Belmont Park. We're previewing it here on Horse Center. Welcome to another edition of Horse Center, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good, Brian. I kind of like it when the 4th of July is in the middle of the week because then the celebration continues for all weekend, and we got a great weekend of racing to cap off the holiday.
Absolutely, Matt. We are going to jump right into that. But first, I think we should talk a little bit about this 3-year-old filly crop of 2018 because we weren't sure where they were headed early in the year, but they're looking better and better, Matt. Of course, the division is topped by Monomoy Girl, who's just been terrific in 4 races this year.
Certainly, Brian. And I want to say thank goodness for the fillies. Every year, Brian, we get through the Triple Crown and we could have a lull in racing, but every year it seems like the fillies are there to pick things up, and we got some terrific performers this year. Not just Monomoy Girl, Wonder Gadot and Midnight Bazoo came back big last weekend in their races.
Absolutely, Monomoy Girl deserving leader of this division, Matt. She's been terrific, doing different things at different tracks. The Rachel Alexandra, the Ashland. She broke badly in Louisiana. She broke on top at Keeneland. In the Kentucky Oaks, she had a fight on her hands, and she battled to victory. And then she came back better than ever in the one-turn Acorn at Belmont Park on Belmont Stakes Day. But the biggest win of all in there was the Kentucky Oaks. And the 2 fillies she beat, Matt, who ran 2nd and 3rd that day. You mentioned them, Wonder Gadot, Midnight Bazoo. We were waiting for their return race after the Kentucky Oaks, and it came last weekend in big style. Let's start up north, the Queen's Plate, the most prestigious race north of the border. Woodbine hosted the Queen's Plate once again. Huge field, Matt, 16. Some were fillies. The fillies have had success in this race before, and so it was on Saturday at Woodbine as Wonder Gadot took over at the top of the lane, and Matt, she ran away from the boys in the Queen's Plate.
She sure did, and we kind of talked about it in last week's show that it looked like, even considering everything you just said, it looked like Wonder Gadot was getting a little bit of class relief in there, having battled against these Grade 1 horses that you mentioned. They put blinkers on. Cassie did, and that may have been part of what happened, but what a performance from Wonder Gadot. She loved the extra distance of the 10 furlongs, and she just blitzed that field of 16, most of them being boys.
Absolutely. Like I said, she's a 2-time graded stakes winner as a 2-year-old, but then somehow, some way, because she kept running good races, she was running into Monomoy Girl. She was having a little excuse here or there, but she was actually 0 for 6 this year. 0 for 6. How can you like a horse who's 0 for 6 so far in the year, Matt? But her races were good enough. She finally got 1.25 miles, as you mentioned, blinkers on, and this was a huge performance. Telekinesis, the other favorite, the lightly raced colt from Stone Street Farm, was game for a while, but there was a good amount of speed in here, and eventually that caught up with him. I still think he can do better things going on. My Bomb, Matt, ahead by a century, got up for 2nd, but this was really all about Wonder Gadot. And the good news for American race fans is 7 races in already, she's going to run in the 2nd leg of the Triple Crown, the Canadian Triple Crown, which of course is the Prince of Wales up at Fort Erie. But then she's Alabama bound, and that also is 1.25 miles, that one at Saratoga.
Yes, that race at Fort Erie is on the dirt, and after that they're going to stay on the dirt and continue to campaign in the U.S.
So that'll be fun to see Wonder Gadot. Now, the horse that ran third in the Kentucky Oaks, was actually the favorite in the Kentucky Oaks, and may not have had everything her way in the Kentucky Oaks, is Midnight Bisou. Midnight Bisou, a daughter of Midnight Lute. Now, she's had 5 stakes races this year, 3 in California. She won all of those easy. The Mother Goose in her first race since the Kentucky Oaks was certainly easy, as Road to Victory's undefeated streak came to an end as Midnight Bisou ran right by her. New barn, Steve Asmussen, she looked good in the Mother Goose, man.
She sure did, Brian. It was a small field, which has happened in the Mother Goose recently, but I don't think that should diminish from that victory because, like you said, Road to Victory is a very nice horse who had been unbeaten at that point, but Midnight Bisou just went right by as easy as she wanted to and drew off nicely. Looks like they're pointing her to the Alabama later on in the meeting and a possible meeting with Wonder Gadot.
Absolutely. You say Gadot, I say Godot. Monomoy Girls, the leader of the division, but Wonder Godot, Midnight Bisou, with their performances on Saturday at Belmont and Woodbine, respectively, reminded us that this is far from a one filly division. Maybe Red Ruby can join the likes of these really top 3-year-old fillies, Matt. Now, she was a filly I liked last fall at Churchill Downs. She ran a couple good races, promising. She's a pretty great daughter of Tiz now. This year, she's had a few starts, and she won impressively at Oaklawn Park in the Martha Washington. She won impressively in the Black Eyed Susan at Pimlico. Both of those races were in the slot. Now, she looked good last fall on fast tracks at Churchill Downs. She was beaten in the Honeybee at Oaklawn Park on a fast track, but she might have had a real good excuse that day, Matt. So we're really looking forward to what Red Ruby can do. If she can throw in a big one, pair up big wins, and this time on a fast track, she'll be running Saturday against a decent enough field, including an interesting South American import for Todd Pletcher in the Delaware Oaks.
Yeah, so we'll see what that one could do, and the 3-year-old filly division could get even deeper.
You got to love the fillies, Matt, and this year is another year with good 3-year-old fillies. Delaware Oaks Saturday, we'll talk about that next week right here on Horse Center. Matt, you alluded to it. There's a lot of good racing this weekend out in Arlington Park, great turf racing. We got some interesting things happening in Iowa, among others. But, of course, the biggest racing of this weekend happens at Belmont Park. The Stars and Stripes card is loaded with graded stakes, Matt. It's also loaded with good horses. Let's start with the biggest of all. Matt, I think this is the best Belmont Derby yet.
Yeah, I tell you, Brian, after the tremendous fields and racing on Belmont Stakes Day, it's just amazing, this card that they've come up with at Belmont Park. Most of the fields are big, and they're loaded with really quality horses. And the Belmont Derby is certainly the headliner, $1.2 million in this Grade 1 race, where these 3-year-old males are going to go 10 furlongs on the Belmont Park inner track, which figures to be very hard and very fast.
That firm turf is sure to produce some strong times, as it has for most of this early season at Belmont Park, Matt. You know, normally in a race like this, 1.25 mile big turf race, I would be looking for the best Euro, and that's probably Hunting Horn coming from the barn of Aidan O'Brien. But I tell you what, Matt, this year, the American turf horses, I think they have more turf potential than in many recent years. And we'll start with what happened at Belmont Park in the Pennine Ridge, because I think 2 of the good ones are right there in the Pennine Ridge. It looked like Analyze It had that race won. And then, of course, Catholic Boy, making his return to grass, came back at him and won the Pennine Ridge.
It was certainly an unusually run race, particularly when you're considering that it was Analyze It, who had been unbeaten to that point and had run all of his races in that fashion, making a strong move down the stretch and drawing away from his competition easily. And it sure looked like that's what was going to be happening in the Belmont Derby as he went by Catholic Boy. But when he went by, he lugged in and probably interfered with Catholic Boy, and throwing that in there, it looked like it was just going to be another easy victory for Analyze It. But amazingly, Catholic Boy, they pulled her off the rail, moved her to the outside of Analyze It, and Catholic Boy just came back and went by and won the race in a very unusual fashion. Of course, Catholic Boy is a very good horse, and I think the return to turf got Catholic Boy back on his best surface.
Absolutely. Catholic Boy was a good dirt horse. He won the Remsen Stakes, and he was involved in some stakes races down in Florida especially. But Analyze It, Matt, he's my top 3-year-old turf horse in America. His first 3 races, 2 last year, and then starting out in Keeneland this year, were just superlative. The son of Point of Entry, chained by Chad Brown, was beaten in that Pennine Ridge, but I think that there was something funny going on there in that race, and I don't think it was his best performance. In fact, if you look at that race at a mile and 1/8, where they ran 1:45 and change, by the way, and they really left the rest of the field behind, it would look like Analyze It doesn't want a 1.25 miles. I don't think that's the case. I think it was just one of those things. The son of Point of Entry, I think, will be fine at a 1.25 miles. And I expect a big performance, a bounce-back performance here in the Belmont Derby. Having said that, you had Catholic Boy 3 for 4 on turf, multiple stakes winner on turf already in New York, and ran a very good race in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf last year. So Catholic Boy is a real good turf horse and certainly a major threat in here, as is a lightly raced another horse who's 3 for 4 on turf, Hawkish. Matt, Hawkish is a horse we've been hearing about for a while. Son of Artie Schiller, who was a Breeders' Cup Mile winner. Hawkish has looked really good in his first 4 races on turf, winning 3 of them, including an impressive win last time, going a mile in the Penn Mile at Penn National.
Yes, and Hawkish is trained by Jimmy Toner, who is quite adept at developing talented horses on the turf. You've got these 3 horses that they have similar records, graded stakes wins, 3 out of 4 victories on the turf. They are all super quality American turf horses. And if you're going to separate them, I got to drop Hawkish down a little bit, just because there might be a question about the distance. It looks like Hawkish is probably going to be better at a mile, but we won't know that for sure until this race is run. But if I have to make some decisions in this Belmont Derby, that's what's going to have me putting Hawkish a little bit below Analyze It and Catholic Boy. I think the winner is going to come from those 3, except there are other quality horses in the field, like My Boy Jack, who was last seen finishing a very, very nice 5th in the Kentucky Derby after doing well on the Derby Trail. But we need to remember that My Boy Jack started out his career with a bunch of races on the turf and ran well on the turf. I'm not convinced that the turf is the best surface for My Boy Jack, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that horse.
Absolutely. Getting back to Hawkish, Matt, I agree with you. We really don't know now. I wouldn't be surprised if Hawkish could stretch out and do well at a 1.25 miles. But yeah, all of his wins are at a mile so far. And being a son of Artie Schiller, you have to wonder about the 1.25 miles, but a very impressive young American turf horse, another one as well. I like Analyze It a little bit better than the other Americans, but I'm with Matt here. A strong American cast. Catholic Boy and Hawkish are scary turf horses for Analyze It. My Boy Jack, yeah, I'm with you too, Matt. Good turf form, plenty of good turf form last year. He's raced exclusively on dirt that worked for Catholic Boy in the Pennine Ridge. We certainly wouldn't put past My Boy Jack to run a big race in his return to turf for Desormeaux. And we know, one thing we know about My Boy Jack is the distance shouldn't be a problem, because in the Kentucky Derby, he was 5th, beaten several lengths, but it was really a good performance because considering the wide trip and a little bit of trouble, My Boy Jack ran a very good Kentucky Derby. And then we have Hunting Horn, Aidan O'Brien trained horse. He hadn't really broken through. He ran a good enough French Derby. He was sixth, but he wasn't beaten by very much at all. And then he came to Royal Ascot, Matt, and he got a firmer turf than he ever got before. So the son of Camelot, one of the top young sires in the world, really ran a big race. It wasn't one of Royal Ascot's best races, but he looked good in winning the Hampton Court. And that was June 21. So he'll be coming back on relatively short rest, but that's not unusual for good European turf horses to do. Firm turf, he'll get it again at Belmont, and he'll also get Lasix for the first time. So another scary horse in Hunting Horn.
Yeah, it's the dream team coming over from Great Britain. It's Aidan O'Brien. It's the Coolmore gang. It's Ryan Moore riding, and it's first-time Lasix. Normally, I would be attracted to that, to all of those factors, but I think this American trio is awfully strong. In the past, even though Aidan O'Brien has had a lot of success bringing horses to the Breeders' Cup, he hasn't been quite as successful bringing horses to New York. And yes, Hunting Horn liked a firmer surface at Ascot, but that's a different kind of surface than the firm surface that he's going to be seeing at Belmont Park. So it'll be interesting to see how Hunting Horn does, but I'm leaning to the Americans, and I'm also going to look for Analyze It to turn the tables on Catholic Boy.
Well, there you go. Matt and I both like Analyze It to bounce back after that Pennine Ridge strange defeat to Catholic Boy where he looked home free. And Matt, there's other good horses, other good Europeans coming over. Marad looked really good on the wet turf at Churchill Down a few starts ago. So really good Belmont Derby. But Matt and I are both on Analyze It on Saturday. Hey, Matt, we already talked about some really good 3-year-old dirt fillies. We talked about the Belmont Derby, 1.25 miles on the turf. Let's combine the two, and what do you get? You get the Belmont Oaks, also 1.25 miles Saturday. It's part of this Stars and Stripes card. And Matt, we were excited about the Belmont Derby. We both like to Analyze It, but in the Belmont Oaks, there's a lot of fillies that could win this race. It's not only deep, talented, but it's wide open. Do you want to start with Toinette or Paved or maybe La Senor, or how about Significant Form, Matt? The Way I Am, Athena, I'm not sure how to say her name, Fatal Bear, Kappa Temptress. I'll let you figure out who you want to start with among those many very, very capable 3-year-old turf fillies.
Yeah, and what Brian's trying to tell you folks is that this $1 million race is loaded. And, folks, Brian and I don't talk about who we like before we do the shows. So it's going to be interesting to see where we end up on this one. But I mean, I guess, Brian, we probably have to start the discussion with the West Coast filly Paved. She's certainly going to be one of the favorites, I would think. Brian, you're better at the line making than I, so you can talk about that a little bit. Paved, if you remember, folks, earlier in the spring, won the El Camino Real on the artificial surface on the Kentucky Derby Trail against the boys. But I think it's pretty clear that this horse is best on the turf, and her last race in the Honeymoon at Santa Anita Park was super impressive for trainer Michael McCarthy, who at one time was an assistant for Todd Pletcher. She certainly is a factor in there. And then there's Toinette, lightly raced filly from the barn of Neil Drysdale, who has done some really nice things in her starts. She's beaten Rushing Fall. She's beaten La Signare, who's in the race. Toinette is a horse that I like a lot in there. Brian, where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, Matt, I'll start with the two you were talking about. Paved, the daughter of Quality Road. I mean, in the El Camino Real Derby, she beat the boys. That race only looks better with Blended Citizen coming to New York and Turfway Park and running nice races. Then she's not been the most consistent filly, but she's run some big turf races out in Santa Anita. The last was the Honeymoon, and that was certainly a strong performance. She'll get a firm turf here at Belmont, which I have a feeling she'll like as well. So certainly a threat, as is Toinette. Yeah, Neil Drysdale's filly. I saw her win at Churchill Downs, as you mentioned. Rushing Fall was still undefeated at the time. She was the head of the 3-year-old filly turf division, but Toinette rolled by her late in the Edgewood. So another with a big shot. I'm a little I'm almost sheepish saying this, but I think for me, the biggest race, because there's just so many good fillies coming from so many different places, was the Wonder Again. And that's where you had La Seigneur for Brian Lynch take to the lead and hold off the favorite Significant Form for Chad Brown. Both of these horses look like the real deal to me. I think you're going to get the favorite coming out of the Wonder Again, Matt. You asked me about the odds. This is one of those races where no one should be under 3-1, and you should have 6 or 7 fillies, 8-1 or less. Just one of those races. La Seigneur, as you said, was beaten first start in America, but I liked what she did at Belmont. She's probably my top pick here, a very tepid top pick. Hoping she can do it again after the Wonder Again win. A little speed, I think, is not a bad thing. But the filly she beat that day, Significant Form, certainly capable of turning the tables.
Yeah, Brian, and in that race in the Wonder Again, she took the field wire to wire. Joel Rosario did a masterful job of controlling the pace out front and was able to hold off, like you said, a very, very talented, Significant Form in there. But that doesn't mean that that horse has to run on the lead in her past performances. She's also run from back in the pack also, and I like the versatility that she's shown in those past races. But and we've talked about Significant Form in there. We've got horses in here coming from Europe. Chipolata is making a first start for Christophe Clement here. First time Lasix, has run well in France, representing West Point Thoroughbreds. That one could do well also. Capla Tempris is also coming over from France, where she won a Grade 1. Where she ran 4th in a Grade 1, but also as a 2-year-old won the Talma up in Canada, coming over for trainer Marco Botti. Talented horse. The O'Brien, Coolmore, Ryan Moore, first-time connections for Athena, but that one's only run a maiden race, and also keeping in mind that this is also going 10 furlongs.
Yeah, Matt, actually, of the Euros, I think the Clement filly has been running against the lesser competition, although, first-time Lasix, that French one could come over and turn in a big performance for sure. But Capla Temptress, she's done well in North America already, and she ran a very good race last time in the French 1,000 guineas. So she's a threat. But I think the biggest threat is O'Brien and Moore, because Athena is quickly improving. We know she already likes the distance. That was a big race last time she ran against older mares, good older. If she can duplicate again, I think she's a major threat. Now, that was only 6 days ago, so it'll be interesting to see if she does indeed make the trip and is in this race. But I think Athena of the Euros is the biggest threat. And one more European import, Matt, Fatale Bear. She won a couple starts ago, beating Paved out in California, and last time she saw her saddle slip. So I think the Honeymoon for her is a throwout.
Yes, and there's also The Way I Am in there for Graham Motion. My feeling on that one is that horse is probably more of a miler in there. We take a look at this entire field. I guess I'm leaning towards the two that I mentioned early on, to Toinette and La Signare, and because you took you made your pick, I'll go with Toinette in there.
Okay, and I'll go with La Senor, one of a few French breds in here. And yeah, the way I am, what a nice filly she is. She just rallies every time. And no surprise to see her run a big race. The Pen Oaks, of course, she was flying and just missed in there. What a great field, deep field. Don't take low odds on anyone in here. Maybe Significant Form is favored, even though she got beat last time in the Wonder again. But it looks like a lot of 5 to 1, 6 to 1 fillies, and beware of O'Brien and Moore again. Matt, as we look at the rest of the big races at Belmont Park on Saturday, Stars and Stripes card at Belmont Park, the first and biggest question I think of the dirt stakes is, will the real Mendelssohn please stand up? What do you think, Matt?
That is the big question. Brian, as you know, I was a huge Mendelssohn fan heading into the Kentucky Derby. As we all know, that was an absolute draw line through. Mendelssohn never got to run, got crushed out of the gate, the rain, the slop, and such. But now we're coming back to the dirt again. We remember before the Derby, Mendelssohn's huge performance in Dubai in the UAE Derby. What are we going to see in the Dwyer? I don't know, Brian. I assume we're going to see Mendelssohn as a pretty significant favorite in there. I don't know if that excites me, but there's a lot of good horses in there. A lot of horses that have question marks about them, too.
Yeah, Matt, from a betting standpoint, I'm not really excited about the Dwyer, but as a fan, I am. I do expect Mendelssohn to run a very good race in here. The Kentucky Derby certainly is a draw line through it. That's not the real Mendelssohn by any shape or form. Beholder's little brother is a very, very big talent. He's undefeated at a mile. I believe he's 3 for 3 at a mile, but he'll have to be sharp in here at this one-turn mile. Maybe there's bigger things to come for him, and this is more of a prep. But I expect class will tell in this Dwyer. There are some interesting horses, as you alluded to, though. Firenze Fire is only one race at Belmont. He won the Champagne also at a mile, the Grade 1 Champagne last year. And we've said all along he's a miler, Matt. Noble Indy, the Louisiana Derby winner, coming out of poor performances in the Kentucky Derby and the Belmont. And how about Rugby Man, Matt? He only had 3 races so far. The Easy Goer was his 3rd lifetime race. It looked like he should win that, but he certainly was green down the stretch. The talented son of Tappet now adds blinkers for this Dwyer.
Yeah, I like Rugby Man in here. Also, Brian, it's Graham Motion. They're putting blinkers on. I guess they're looking to help to solve some of those stretch run issues that happen there. Lightly raced. I think this is a horse that has a lot of room to get better. So if the real Mendelssohn doesn't show up, I think Rugby Man's got a nice shot in there. I think we should also mention 7 Trumpets from the Dale Romans barn, recent allowance winner, finished 2nd on the Derby Trail in the Jerome in New York. Talented horse that I don't think we've seen the best from yet. Another one that could throw in a big one. You know, Romans has a way of getting horses ready for spots like this. But I guess if I got to pick in here, like you said, Brian, I agree. Mendelssohn should win, but I might take a shot on Rugby Man.
Yeah, Rugby Man would be my shot as well, but I want to see Mendelssohn show his true stuff Saturday in the Dwyer. All right, Matt, while that is kind of dominated by Mendelssohn, the Dwyer, we then go to the Suburban, and the Suburban, I think, is another one of those almost Belmont Oaks type of races where you have a lot of interesting horses. I'm just going to run through them real quick here, Matt. Perhaps the most interesting 3 out of the Brooklyn. Opportunity, that wonderful 7-year-old horse who keeps going and going, strong and long. War Story ran a very good Brooklyn, just couldn't hold off Opportunity late, and is a real war horse, a warrior, if you will. And then don't forget about Take Your Guns, who came up a little short after a little bit of a wide trip there in the Brooklyn. He's an improving sort. Then you got Dr. Dorr, who's putting his talent finally to good use for out there in California, the son of Looking at Lucky. Strong second in the Gold Cup last time, and he won the California nicely before that. Tapwrit, the Belmont winner. Diversify, the Jockey Club Gold Cup winner. Matt, will they be ready to show their best stuff here in the Suburban?
That's quite a field that you described there, Brian. What a great field. They're going 10 furlongs. They're not going the mile and a half here. Lots of question marks about Tapwrit. It seems like they have solved the foot problems that plagued him all last year after the Belmont Stakes. They tried to get him back and take care of the feet, but they weren't able to. Came back, finished third in an allowance race in his last start, which was clearly just a prep race in here. I don't know, Brian. I think I'm leaning towards Opportunity. He seems to just absolutely love Belmont Park. He's 2 for 2 at Belmont Park. He loves the big sweeping turns at Belmont Park. I don't know. He just never runs a bad race, and I'm gonna go with him here in Suburban.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all, Matt. It'll be interesting to see. He's one of the horses I think they have to bet, and it's possible he's the favorite. Tapwrit, you look at that losing allowance race, and I think people are gonna wonder about that. But I think that was a really good prep. Pletcher likes to come back and win, of course, but that was a fast mile. That should do a world of good for Tapwrit as he's getting more conditioning this year. Tapwrit's probably not going to be my top pick, but I certainly think he's got a big shot. The Belmont winner ran a lot of good races last year. Even the Travers is fourth in the Travers. Tapwrit is a big danger in here. Diversify obviously likes Belmont. He's rounding back into form. Or Dr. Dorr of really sharp form out in California. They're both speed types, so that could take a little starch out of either one, but they're both dangerous in here. Take Your Guns as a long shot is interesting to me because I think he's still got a little bit more under the tank. And don't forget about War Story, because in the Brooklyn, if that was a 1.25 mile race, War Story might have beaten Opportunity that day, and War Story might get the trip, a little bit earlier jump at the horses up there on the lead than Opportunity does. And if you're telling me War Story is going to be 8-10 to 1 because of the depth of this field, maybe War Story's my play.
And War Story always shows up and always competes. So at that kind of price, you got to look more than once at War Story.
Absolutely. But an interesting Suburban, like I said, a Jockey Club Gold Cup winner, a Belmont Stakes winner, the top, probably the 3 best horses from the Brooklyn. You got Millionaires, you got a California horse who's really come into his own of late. So a very interesting Suburban, as is the Belmont Sprint, Matt. Now, I'm not really, to be honest, I'm not really interested in this as a race of depth. I believe there's only 6 in here. There is some speed, but the top 2 really are 2 of the finest sprinters in the country, and both were good performers on Belmont Stakes Day, although Whitmore second in the True North and Limousine Liberal third in the Met Mile. Neither got the win. I think one of them will get the win on Saturday.
It would seem that way, Brian. The Belmont Sprint, it's a grade 2, and it's also a Breeders' Cup win and you're in race. Please note that the race is run at 7 furlongs, which is a distance that Limousine Liberal loves. I think that's Limousine Liberal's best distance. The third in the Met Mile was a really, really good performance because I don't think the mile is that horse's best distance. And he ran third behind B Jersey, who just ran an amazing race in the Met Mile in that battle with Mind Your Biscuits. I think Limousine Liberal's got a little bit of a class edge in here. You got to love Whitmore. Ran a big race in the True North. 6 furlongs, I think, seems to be Whitmore's best distance. You also have in the race, just need to mention Shaft of Light for trainer Jorge Navarro. who has a way of getting horses to let loose some big performances. Shaft of Light was second last time out in the Salvador Mile behind Paige McKinney at Monmouth Park. That was a 2-turn mile. He's cutting back to 7 furlongs, which is clearly his favorite distance. Certainly class questions there, but Navarros are always dangerous. But I got to give my nod to Limousine Liberal.
I'm with you, Matt. Yeah, and I think the speed, the other speed in the race, there's some quality horses. Favorable outcome, we didn't mention either. A horse who could bounce back and still be a nice, especially at 7 furlongs. But yeah, I think Limousine Liberal fits really well in here. I've said all along that watch out for him on slop. If the Breeders' Cup sprints on slop this year, he'll be my top pick. What are we, 4 or 5 months out still? But Limousine Liberal is better than ever, and 7 furlongs is a good distance. He's got speed to run at. I like him a little bit better than Whitmore in here. Limousine Liberal and Whitmore are 2 horses that I fully expect to see in the Breeders' Sprint at the end of the year, Matt. That's a pretty nice card. Belmont Derby, Belmont Oaks, Dwyer Suburban, and Belmont Sprint Saturday at Belmont. Wouldn't you say, Matt?
It sure is. And those, those stakes races are part of. There's a late pick 4 at Belmont, and if you're on the track, there's the Naira Bets pick 5, which has got all those stakes in it that you can bet if you're on site at the track or through Naira Bets.
That's right, Matt. And folks, again, we did a Thursday show this week to preview all the big races from Belmont. Next week, we plan on being back on Tuesday for another big edition of Horse Center, including talking a lot about what we just talked about here as a preview. Matt, I want to thank our sponsor, the best contest site out there, Derby Wars, as well. And thank you, folks. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation if you haven't already. And hey, Matt, we're getting really close. Now, I said this last week, but we might just have a 2-year-old in the Derby Day Racing Barn. That's Matt and our venture, racing partnership venture that we're started. And looks like we might have a 2-year-old in the barn by the time we air this show next week even.
That's exciting news for Derby Day Racing and for all of our partners. And of course, as always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
Thank you to Brett, and thank you for watching again, folks. And as we sign off on this edition of Horse Center, let's take a look back at one of the most spectacular 2-year-old filly performances of recent years. Matt, Restless Rider is the daughter of Distorted Humor from the Kenny McPeak barn. She won a maiden nicely at Churchill Downs, but she came back, and what she did in the debutante was a wow.